By the time the waiter lit the candles on my birthday cake, my husband was already rehearsing the line he thought would destroy me. Lombardi's on Fifth wasn't the kind of place where people yelled. It was the kind of place where billionaires whispered and the room leaned in to listen. 40 guests packed the private dining suite, Princeton ties, Aegis Capital executives, Caldwell relatives, dripping diamonds they didn't earn. Every one of them had been invited for one purpose, to watch Spencer and me. He stood up chair scraping across the marble. The chandeliers hit his cufflinks just right. Brianna probably chose them. She sat beside him in a white dress so bright it hurt smiling, like she'd already won the house, the cars, and the life I built. Spencer raised his glass. To new beginnings. His pause was theatrical cruel, without Olivia. A few people gasped. Most people laughed. The kind of laugh that slaps harder than any hand. He didn't look at me when he delivered the killing blow. We're done. You'll get the papers tomorrow. Happy birthday. Phones came out. Someone whispered, holy shit, is he really doing this? Someone else said, record it, she's gonna cry. But I didn't cry. I stood. Slowly. Silently. The kind of rise that makes a room inhale and forget to exhale. My clutch was small, satin, nothing special. But inside it was the one thing nobody in that room expected me to have the truth. I walked toward Spencer, past the wives, who'd always cut me out of conversations, past the investors, who never learned my name, even though they built fortunes off my work, past Brianna, whose smile faltered 1 millimeter as she realized I wasn't breaking. When I reached him, I placed a black envelope on the table. Not tossed, placed, deliberate. Before you toast to your new beginning, I said call your parents, ask why their loan just went into emergency recall, then call the Aegis board. Tell them why Cassandra Engine is no longer yours. The room stopped breathing. Across the table, an older man, Charles Monroe, the one investor Spencer feared, leaned back, studying me like a newly discovered asset. Then he lifted his phone and typed something quickly. Subject: we need to talk about Olivia Reed. That's when everything flipped. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. People like to say betrayals happen suddenly. One moment you're fine, the next moment your world burns. They're wrong. Betrayal is slow, a leak not an explosion. A steady drip that rots everything from the inside before anyone hears the crack. My marriage didn't collapse at Lombardi's. It collapsed in 100 small moments long before the candles on my birthday cake melted. 8 years with Spencer Caldwell taught me exactly how pain accumulates, quietly, politely, with a smile. The first 3 years, they were good. Or maybe I was just too in love to see the signs. He'd come to MIT for a guest lecture. I was finishing my PhD in computational modeling hair in a messy bun clothes wrinkled from sleeping in the lab. He told me I was brilliant. He told me he'd never met anyone who could think the way I do. He told me we'd build something together. 7 months later, I married him, and for a while, we were a team. Or maybe I thought we were. Then came the recalibrations, the tiny corrections, the suggestions, the careful trimming of who I was. It started with the coffee. 195 degrees, Liv, he said once. It tastes burnt otherwise. So I got a kettle with digital precision. He still frowned. Then came the way I wrote emails for Aegis Capital emails I was ghostwriting for him, because the board expected their golden boy to articulate ideas he barely understood. You sound too technical, he'd say. Don't make me look like I need you. He said it with a laugh. A joke, but a joke that stuck. Then the little humiliations grew teeth. His mother, Veronica, would walk into our Westchester kitchen like she owned the oxygen. Olivia, dear, do you really think that blouse flatters your figure? Or what a shame your mother never taught you proper hosting? Or the one that always stuck under my skin. Oh, right, you're from Ohio. That explains a lot. She'd say it sweetly. Sweetly is the most violent tone in the world. Spencer never defended me. He'd just sip his wine and let me bleed quietly. And I did bleed silently the way good wives are supposed to. I'd wake up every morning at 5:30. Our California king bed felt like 2 separate continents. He slept facing away from me always. That space between us, it felt like an ocean. I'd slip from bed pad through the house, 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 3-car garage. The kind of house people bragged about. The kind of house I didn't feel welcome in. The kitchen was always freezing in the morning. The marble countertops sucked warmth out of my fingers as I prepared his routine egg white omelet whole grain toast with exactly 1 teaspoon of almond butter spread edge to edge. Never too much, Never too little. Perfection was expected. He'd walk in at 6:45, internal clock ticking like a metronome. He'd sit, scroll, eat, leave. No good morning. No thank you. Just tasks completed. At Aegis, it was worse. They called me Spencer's administrative support, even though Cassandra engined the algorithm that built their entire trading division came from my dissertation, my code, my work. But in the company handbook developed under leadership of Ethan Ward, a man who once asked me what a neural net was. Every time I offered an insight at meetings, the room went quiet until Spencer repeated it 10 minutes later. Then everyone nodded like he'd just invented gravity. None of this was a sudden earthquake. It was erosion, a cliff losing an inch at a time. At first you don't notice, then you blink and realize half the land is gone. The tether that kept me sane was my mom, Diane. She called every night, her voice always warm, always hopeful. "You okay, honey?" she'd ask even when I lied every time. I'd hold the blue ceramic mug she gave me when I moved to New York. For when life gets too loud, she'd said. I still used it. It was one of the few things that felt like mine. Then came the moment that changed something deep in me. Not the big betrayal, the small one that preceded it. A charity fund my mom applied to for help with her surgery. Lost its budget overnight. Vanished. She was heartbroken. 2 days later, I saw something on Aegis's internal log. Cassandra engine had been used to manipulate short-term portfolio motion for that exact foundation. Spencer had approved the transaction. He made money off my mother's pain. That was the first time my hands shook with something colder than fear. Not sadness, not disappointment, clarity. And clarity is the most dangerous emotion. I didn't know it then, but that was the first crack in the old version of me, the version he counted on staying small, quiet, grateful. The woman walking into Lombardi's 8 years later wasn't that woman anymore, not even close. After that discovery about the foundation money, something inside me stopped pretending. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just stopped. But stopping pretend and actually getting out are two different things. People forget the middle, the slow crawl between I'm done and I can finally breathe. For me, that middle was made of tiny moments that made my skin feel too tight, like I was suffocating inside a life that wasn't mine. 2 weeks after the foundation incident, Spencer announced that we'd be attending his parents' monthly family dinner, a ritual that felt more like a performance review than a meal. The Caldwell estate in Greenwich was immaculate, in a way that didn't feel human. 3 acres of landscaping trimmed with surgical precision, lights glowing warm in the windows, but warmth that felt staged like everything else about that house. We walked in, and immediately Veronica swooped toward us. "There you are," she said, kissing Spencer and airbrushing past me. "Olivia, you can put the wine in the kitchen. I'd brought a bottle from a vineyard my mom used to love, something sentimental." Veronica didn't notice. She never did. Dinner was roast lamb, crystal glasses, polished silver. Madison and Chloe Spencer's sisters sat across from me, scrolling their phones under the table. At one point, Chloe looked up and asked, "So, Olivia, do you like work? Or is that just a hobby thing you do for Spencer's company?" Before I could answer, Gregory, their father, laughed. "Sweetheart, she keeps Spencer organized. That's valuable. Some women just aren't built for high-level strategy." The table chuckled like it was a harmless joke. Harmlessness is a convenient lie. I chewed silently, feeling the familiar burn in my chest. Anger mixed with shame, an exhausting cocktail I'd tasted too many times. Later that night, lying in our bed, the space between us colder than usual, I watched Spencer sleep. This man, with his curated charm and polished success, had built an empire on my mind, while convincing everyone, including me, that I should be grateful just to be near the table. The next morning, his first words weren't good morning. They were investor meeting at 10. Be there by 9:30 and set everything up. That was my life distilled into one sentence. At Aegis, the culture of erasing me was so normal, it almost felt logical. The office smelled like strong coffee and ambition. People moved fast, talked fast, decided fast. But when it came to giving credit, glacial. I'd stand in the glass conference room, arranging leather folders while Spencer practiced a script he barely understood. Ethan Ward, the man who got credit for my algorithm, would walk in, pat my shoulder, and say thanks for organizing everything live. Saving us again. Saving them. Again. And again. And again. I thought I could tolerate it. For a while I did. But the tolerance came with a cost. I started shrinking. I stopped pitching ideas. Stopped correcting people when they misquoted my work. Stopped telling my mother the truth about how lonely I felt. One night I walked into our kitchen past midnight. The house was dark, quiet, frozen. I stood there holding my blue ceramic mug, staring at nothing, and honest to God, I didn't recognize the woman reflected in the microwave door. Her eyes looked tired. Her posture was small. Her expression was the expression of someone still trying to earn a place in her own home. The next morning, I told Spencer I wanted to visit my mom before her rescheduled surgery. He didn't even look up from his phone. She still lives in that tiny rental, right? That's depressing. She needs help, I said. Then hire a nurse. You can't disappear right now. We have Goldman coming next week. Disappear. That's what he thought visiting my mother was an inconvenience. I felt something inside me stretch thin, like a thread pulled taut. Then he smirked at whatever lit up his phone and turned it face down. I caught a flash of a name, Brianna. Later that week, I overheard Lindsay, the receptionist who adored gossip, say something that made my blood go cold. She was chatting with another assistant at a cafe near the office. Spencer's planning something huge for his wife's birthday. Like, life-changing huge. They giggled, and I knew. Not what the plan was, but that it wasn't good. The fear I felt wasn't normal. It was instinctive primal, the kind of fear you feel when your life is already half-packed in a suitcase you haven't touched yet. But the real shift happened the night my mom arrived unannounced. She walked into my kitchen, took one long look at me, and asked, "Why do you look like someone who apologizes for breathing?" I laughed it off. She didn't. Later, when Spencer's car pulled into the driveway, I flinched without meaning to. My mom saw it. Everything changed in her eyes. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "who are you afraid of, him or the version of you he turned you into?" I didn't answer, but the silence was enough. That was the night the old Olivia died quietly in the dark. The woman who stood up at Lombardi's weeks later, she started breathing that night. The night my mom asked that question, who was I afraid of? I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Spencer breathe on the other side of the bed. Not peacefully, possessively. Like the whole room belonged to him, including the oxygen. That was the moment something in me clicked into place. A cold, precise clarity I hadn't felt in years. People talk about breaking points like explosions. Mine was silent. A sharp internal pivot from, maybe it'll get better, to, it ends now. The plan didn't arrive all at once. It formed in layers like a blueprint, unfolding in my mind. First information, I needed to know what Spencer was hiding, where the money was moving, who Brianna really was, and how deep the restructuring went. Every file I backed up, every server patch he approved without reading, became a quiet weapon. Second, protection. If Spencer was preparing to erase me, I had to build something he couldn't touch. That's when Helix Holdings was born. One parent company, several shells, all clean, all legal, all mine. Companies that looked like vendors but were really vaults, each holding a piece of Cassandra engine that technically no longer belonged to Aegis. Third, leverage. The Caldwell family worshipped two things, liquidity and legacy. I used both. Refinancing their Hamptons property through a friend's fund restructuring Madison and Chloe's trusts. Slipping in cross-default clauses where no one bothered to read. All of it braided together so tightly that one pull would unravel everything. Fourth, witnesses. I reached out to Harper Nguyen, not as a friend, but as the only person I trusted to be smarter than Spencer's entire legal team combined. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She simply said, "If you want out with power, we do this my way." And I agreed. The final rule of the plan was simple. I would not react, not cry, not warn, not give Spencer a single sign that I knew what he was planning. I would stay silent, and silence when chosen is a blade. By the time my birthday approached, I wasn't scared of what Spencer was going to do. I was ready for what I was going to do next. The first night of the plan began in the most unglamorous place imaginable, the guest bathroom at the far end of our house, tile floor, cold against my bare feet, exhaust fan humming low, door locked as if that thin piece of wood could protect me from the life crumbling outside it. I set the toilet lid down, placed my laptop on top, and balanced myself on the edge of the tub. That tiny room, barely larger than a walk-in closet, became my war room. I opened a blank document and started drawing the structure of Helix Holdings by hand on the tiled wall using a black dry erase marker I'd stolen from Spencer's office. White tile squares turned into grids of arrows and boxes. Parent company at the top, 3 subsidiaries branching out, 2 shell companies for consulting, 1 for data storage, One Orphan LLC that existed for the sole purpose of holding Cassandra's heartbeat. It was messy, imperfect, rushed, but it was mine. The first thing I'd built in years that Spencer didn't own. The next step was money, all the tiny drips of funds he didn't know I had. For years I'd done freelance algorithm review work under a pseudonym. Small payments, 100 here, 300 there, enough to accumulate but not enough to get attention. Now those payments mattered. Every night I'd sneak into that bathroom with my laptop earbuds and transferring $50 at a time into accounts Spencer didn't know existed. Always under the radar. Never enough to trigger questions. My heart raced each time I clicked submit, imagining Spencer suddenly banging on the door, but he never did. The real adrenaline came from Cassandra. During scheduled maintenance windows, the ones Spencer never bothered to attend, I'd replicate pieces of the algorithm. Tiny fragments, modules that looked useless alone but were essential together. I'd create fake patches for Ethan to test. Dummy versions that mimicked outputs but removed the proprietary core. He never noticed. He'd send me lazy thumbs-up emojis after each test. Clueless that the real engine was quietly becoming mine, line by line, signature by signature. What I wasn't prepared for, though, was how much my body needed this. Purpose, motion, control. And then there was Harper. We met at a bar in Brooklyn, deliberately chosen because no hedge fund manager would set foot there unless they got lost. Dim lights. Old neon sign flickering in the corner. Sticky floors. A bartender who looked like he judged your soul based on your drink order. Harper arrived in a leather jacket, hair, and a messy knot face, bare except for eyeliner that made her look perpetually unimpressed. "You look like hell," she said instead of hello. "I feel like it." We order whiskey mine neat hers with one ice cube she never let melt. Tell me everything she said, and she meant it. I did. The restructuring documents, the trust tricks, the Hamptons refinancing, the backups, the overheard conversations about Brianna, the deleted messages, the birthday surprise. At one point she muttered, "Jesus Christ," under her breath, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she sat back, drummed her fingers on the bar, and said, "Okay, then here's what we do. Not you. We." She mapped out a timeline of protections, filings, digital footprints, and legal contingencies. Everything Spencer thought he invented. Harper had seen before, but never this elegantly. Never from someone who had built the weapon herself. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone. Back at home, things began shifting in ways Spencer didn't understand. His first tantrum came out of nowhere. It was a Tuesday morning. He was reviewing Cassandra reports when he slammed his fist onto the counter hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Why is the system lagging? It's never lagged. Ethan can't get the predictive curves aligned." I knew exactly why. Because I'd begun separating Cassandra's neural mapping modules into licensed segments. Each tiny extraction made the system just a little less intuitive. I shrugged. Maybe it's just a busy morning. He glared at me like he wanted to peel the skin off my face. The next mini victory came during a dinner with his parents, a dinner I orchestrated. We sat in their immaculate dining room, candles flickering over plates of seared halibut. Gregory complained about rising mortgage rates like always. I kept my tone casual. You'd never know I was preparing to detonate the foundation of their entire financial stability. "You know, I said some friends from MIT started a private fund. They specialize in real estate-backed loans for families with strong portfolios." Veronica perked up instantly. "Better rates than the banks." Her voice almost trembled with hope. "Much better," I said smoothly, "and flexible. No prepayment penalties." Gregory leaned forward. "How would we get in? I could make an introduction." I did not smile. Not once. Not even when they thanked me like I'd brought salvation to their gilded doorstep. They didn't know that my friend's fund was Helix Holdings under a different name, or that the contract they'd soon sign contained cross-default clauses that could collapse their mortgage and their daughter's trusts in a single phone call. They didn't ask for details. Caldwells never do when they think the universe owes them a favor. And then there were the sisters Madison and Chloe. One afternoon, they asked me to help restructure their investment accounts. "Taxes are killing us," Madison groaned. "Can you make it?" Smarter Chloe asked. I did. Beautifully. I drafted the documents, slipping in tiny clauses that tied their trusts to Gregory's loan structure. They signed without reading. "Thank you," Liv Madison said, kissing my cheek dismissively. "You're so good at the boring stuff," I smiled, thinking you have no idea how unboring this is. Meanwhile, Spencer grew more erratic, short-tempered, Obsessed with getting the birthday evening perfect, he checked his phone constantly, kept texting Brianna in the bathroom, started taking calls in the garage. He was unraveling and he didn't even know why. One night while I was in the bathroom drawing connections between Helix subsidiaries, he knocked on the door. "Olivia, are you okay? You've been in there for 30 minutes. My heart almost exploded. Cassandra documentation was open on my screen. Licensing files exposed. Stomach bug, I croaked. There was a pause, then the sound of him walking away. I exhaled so sharply it hurt. By the end of that week, I knew something I hadn't known in years. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was ahead. The week before my birthday, New York turned cold in that abrupt, almost rude way it does one morning, warm enough for light sweaters, the neck so sharp it nipped the skin through a coat. I felt the change in my bones, but more importantly, I felt the change in the house. The air shifted. Spencer started waking earlier, pacing around the bedroom, with his phone pressed to his ear, lowering his voice whenever I walked in. He'd slam drawers harder, snap when I asked innocuous questions like, "Are you using the car today?" His nerves began to fray like threads pulled from an expensive suit. The irony, of course, was that he thought I was the one unraveling. One night around 11, he walked into the kitchen while I was making tea. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me. "You've been off," he said, distracted, forgetful, emotional. I let the steam rise between us like a shield. Or maybe I'm just tired. He tilted his head, analyzing me like a malfunctioning component. "If something's wrong, Olivia, you should tell me before it becomes a problem." I almost laughed. Before it becomes a problem. He already was the problem. But I didn't say that. I stirred my tea slowly. "I'm fine." He nodded, satisfied in that condescending way that told me he'd already made up a story about me in his head. I knew what came next. He'd label me unstable, irrational, emotional. The classic pre-divorce narrative men in his circle used like a manual. But that was exactly why I needed the next phase of the plan. Documentation. I spent hours at the brownstone in Park Slope, my secret refuge, setting up the digital archive. Banker boxes lined the small office I'd carved out of the second bedroom. Each box had its own label: Caldwell loans, trust funds, Cassandra licenses, email threads. Every piece of proof that Spencer wasn't the genius he advertised. Everything showing the way he siphoned credit and stole my work. I filmed myself explaining each box, time-stamped, calm, articulate, no emotion that could be twisted into unstable. Just facts. Hard, cold facts. Harper reviewed the footage and said, "This isn't just enough. This is bulletproof." The confidence in her voice was something I'd forgotten I deserved. Meanwhile, I kept collecting tiny victories. At Aegis, Ethan started texting me more often. "Hey, Liv, Cassandra is spitting out weird anomalies again. Can you look weird anomalies?" As if the system randomly decided to rebel. I checked under the guise of maintenance. Every time I made sure the anomalies stayed just annoying enough to seed doubt in Spencer's leadership, but not enough to expose the deeper restructuring beneath. During a Friday meeting, Spencer's voice cracked mid-presentation when a predictive graph refused to load. He tapped the clicker twice, forced a laugh. "Looks like Wi-Fi issues." Across the room, I saw Charles Monroe watching him with eyebrows slightly raised. Monroe was a man who didn't believe in glitches, only in competence. That was another small win. At home, the rifts inside the Caldwell family widened in ways none of them expected. Veronica started calling me for small favors, her tone syrupy, suspiciously sweet. "Olivia, dear, could you send over that refinance paperwork?" Gregory misplaced the copy. "Misplaced? Sure." I forwarded the documents with perfect politeness, knowing full well she hadn't read a single clause I inserted. A day later, Chloe sent me a frantic text. "Liv, I can't access my investment portal. Dad says call you." I pretended to troubleshoot, pretended to be helpful, pretended not to hear the irritation in her voice when she realized her father had absolute control over her trust now. "Don't worry," I told her. "It'll resolve soon." Soon was such a deliciously flexible word. Then came the near exposure. I was in the bathroom again, updating the final Cassandra module, when I heard footsteps approaching fast. Too fast. Olivia Spencer's voice cut through the door. Why is the lock on my breath froze? My laptop was open code, glowing bright, licensing logs visible. I flipped it shut so fast the metal clicked loud enough for him to hear. "I'm just a second." "What are you doing?" He sounded irritated, suspicious. Think. "I'm sick," I said, adding a groan. A beat of silence, then disgust. Are you kidding? I have a breakfast meeting. Don't spread it around the house. His footsteps retreated. My pulse pounded in my ears until I felt dizzy. When I opened my laptop again, my hands were still shaking. It took 2 minutes before the tremors stopped. But the moment the fear ebbed, a stronger feeling rose beneath it: determination. If he got even a hint of what I was doing, he'd crush me. Not emotionally, strategically, publicly. Which meant the plan needed one final layer and emotional decoy. So I gave him one. Over the next few days, I played the role he expected. Quiet, tired, distant, overwhelmed. At breakfast, I let my shoulders sag. When he criticized the way I prepared his coffee, I simply said, sorry, without fight. One evening, he found me staring off while chopping vegetables, and said, not unkindly, but with that same superiority, you're burnt out. Maybe you should take a break after your birthday. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted him to think, because someone who's burnt out can't possibly be a threat. Meanwhile, chaos simmered beneath the surface. At ages, small inconsistencies piled up: charts, misaligned updates, delayed predictions off by fractions that made big people nervous. A junior analyst overheard Spencer yelling at Ethan in the hallway, slamming his palm against the glass wall hard enough to leave a print. At home, Veronica snapped at Gregory over dinner because the bank sent a strange request for updated documentation. Madison complained to me that her trust distributions hit a temporary hold. Chloe asked if I noticed her father was drinking more. This wasn't collapse yet, just the cracks before the wall gives. And then came the moment that pushed everything into motion. The night before my birthday, Spencer walked into the living room carrying a small box tied with a navy ribbon. He set it in front of me like an offering. For your mother, he said. A gift. She needs a break. Inside, I found a pair of plane tickets to Paris. First class. For the exact week of her surgery. My stomach turned. You want her to leave the country? I asked quietly. She'll be fine. The surgery can wait. You need to be focused. Focused. On his spectacle. On my own humiliation. I looked up and saw the satisfaction in his smirk, the belief that he was benevolent, generous, reasonable. That was the moment my anger crystallized into something sharper. Later, I found my mother in the guest room holding the tickets. Without a word, she tore them neatly in half. Her voice didn't shake when she said, if he thinks he can buy my silence or your compliance, he's a bigger fool than I thought. I nodded. Finally feeling the weight shift. That night, I packed the final version of the black envelope. Double-checked every clause, every digital trigger, every timestamp. At midnight, Harper texted, once you hand it over, you can't ever be the old you again. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing good. She died months ago. Because by then, I wasn't afraid of the confrontation. I was ready for the explosion. The funny thing about a good plan is that the universe seems to test it right before it lands. The week leading up to my birthday wasn't smooth. It was jagged. Every sharp edge of Spencer's character cut a little deeper, not because I was weaker, but because I finally understood what each cut meant. He didn't sense strength in my silence. He smelled an opportunity. 2 days after my mom ripped the Paris ticket, Spencer scheduled a check-in with Philip Grant, his attorney. He mentioned it casually over coffee. Philip's dropping by later, he said, tapping his phone. We're going to talk about structure. Just normal pre-liquidity hygiene. Normal. As if planning my erasure was a dental appointment. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice neutral. Do I need to be there? He shook his head, eyes still glued to his screen. No need. It's legal stuff. Might be upsetting. Upsetting. The word tasted like poison. At noon, I watched from the upstairs hallway as Philip walked in. Dark suit, slim briefcase expression, practiced and neutral. The kind of man who could tell you your life was over without wrinkling his tie. I stayed out of sight, listening to the low murmur of voices from Spencer's study, catching fragments, when the door drifted slightly open. Narrative of instability, documentation of her moods. If she reacts badly at the event, even better. My nails bit into my palms hard enough to leave marks. So that was the play. Provoke me, humiliate me, push until I broke in public. Then hand a judge a neat story about an irrational wife who couldn't handle reality. For about 30 seconds, rage burned so hot I actually considered storming in, flipping the desk, and screaming every truth I'd been hiding. Instead, I walked back to the guest room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed until the heat drained out of my bones. If they wanted instability, they were going to be disappointed. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Hey Olivia, this is Brianna. I think we should talk woman to woman. It's better if you hear some things from me instead of in front of everyone. I stared at the text bile rising. Woman to woman. I could picture her typing that nails perfectly manicured expression, sympathetic in the mirror, playing the peacemaker while being the knife. Harper's voice echoed in my head. Do not engage on their terms. I typed back one word. No. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you're making this harder than it has to be. I muted the thread and forwarded the entire exchange to Harper with a single line add to file. Within minutes, she replied, already in the timeline. Remember, they're building a story. So are we. The story on their side escalated fast. That night, Veronica invited my mother for coffee. She made it sound innocent. Just us moms, she trilled over the phone. Diane and I haven't really had a chance to connect, you know. It'd be nice to talk about how to support you. I knew better. But my mom, she believes in talking. In church basements and kitchen tables, fixing things that are broken. She agreed. They met at a cafe near the house, the kind with white tiles and black chairs and the constant hiss of an espresso machine. I sat in my car across the street, engine off, watching through the window as Veronica leaned forward, hands wrapped around her cup like she understood warmth. My mother nodded, listening. At one point, her mouth tightened and she shook her head sharply. Veronica's smile froze, then sharpened. Later, Mom climbed into my car, cheeks flushed with cold and anger. Well, I asked. She thinks you're cracking, Mom said flatly. She suggested, maybe I encourage you to seek help before things get messy. And she kept saying how grateful she was that Spencer was handling everything so compassionately. I clenched the steering wheel. What did you say? Mom buckled her seatbelt, eyes dark. I told her I've watched you rebuild your life a dozen times since you were 10. I told her you don't crack. You bend. And people like her should be very afraid when you stop bending. A laugh burst out of me, sharp and wet. I wiped my eyes. Thanks, Mom. She squeezed my hand. Let them think what they want, she said. Crazy is just what men like that call women who stop playing nice. Still, the pressure was building. The next day, Philip emailed me directly. The subject line might as well have been a slap. Exploring amicable separation options. The body of the email was worse. Cold lawyerly language about transition, minimizing disruption, protecting reputations. There was a draft proposal attached, one that offered me a small stipend, no claim to Cassandra, and a heavily implied directive to stay quiet. At the bottom, a line. We strongly encourage resolving this privately, before emotions escalate publicly. I stared at the screen for a long time, then forwarded the email to Catherine, the attorney Harper had brought in on my side. She called within 10 minutes. Under no circumstance do you respond, she said. They're fishing. They want you to act impulsively so they can paint you as erratic. We respond after the birthday, not before. But what if Olivia? Her voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Firm. Grounding. You are not the problem. You are the majority creator of the core asset. You are the spouse being ambushed. Let them overplay their hand. That's how we win. The word win sat strangely in my chest. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not just. It was about refusing to be cut out of my own life, my own work, my own story. And the more they pushed, the more focused I became. By the time that week ended, I could feel the walls of my life flexing around the pressure. Every conversation had a hidden script. Every glance felt like someone checking for cracks. They weren't subtle anymore. They didn't have to be. In their minds, I was already half gone. What they did not realize was that the more they tightened the noose, the sharper I was making the knife. If the first half of that week was pressure, the second half was suffocation. The signs weren't huge. Spencer was too calculating for that, but they were unmistakable once I knew what to look for. It started with the medicine cabinet. One morning I opened it to grab aspirin and noticed a new bottle sitting perfectly centered on the middle shelf. White label, clean typography, sertraline, an antidepressant. I didn't take sertraline. I never had. But someone wanted it to look like I did. I picked it up, turning the bottle in my hand. The prescription date was recent. The name on the label was mine. The doctor's name was someone I didn't recognize. A chill crawled down my spine. I heard footsteps behind me and quickly set it back. Spencer leaned against the doorway, sipping coffee, studying me. Feeling better today, he asked lightly. I didn't answer, and he didn't push. He didn't need to. A seed had been planted, one he thought would bloom into a narrative he could weaponize later. That afternoon, I photographed the bottle from every angle, emailed it to Harper, and Catherine, then tucked it inside a sealed evidence bag. One more piece of their story, turning into mine. The next complication hit from a different angle. I got a call from Human Resources at Aegis, an unfamiliar woman with a careful voice. Olivia, we're conducting a routine climate check with partners and staff. We'd love to schedule a brief conversation regarding your experience at the firm. I froze. Climate check? Aegis never cared about climate. They cared about optics. I'm not officially staff, I said slowly. Yes, well, the HR woman replied several people mentioned you were in the office often and might have relevant insight. Someone was trying to bait me into complaining, into saying something that could be framed as instability or unprofessionalism. I kept my voice steady. I'm not available for interviews at this time. A pause. If something comes up during your husband's transition, please let us know if you need support. Transition. That word told me everything. Spencer wasn't just planning a divorce. He was repositioning himself inside the firm, creating clean distance, cleaning me out of the picture. I walked into the brownstone that evening and didn't even take my coat off before sinking onto the couch. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with anger. Not the burning anger I'd felt months earlier. This was colder, sharper, like a blade being tempered. I didn't have time to fall apart, not with what came next. The first crack appeared in Spencer's composure the night before the party. He came home late, tie askew jacket slung over his shoulder. His eyes were glassy, not from alcohol, but from exhaustion he didn't know how to hide. He dropped onto the stool across from me at the kitchen island. Do you ever feel, he said abruptly, like people around you are incompetent? It was so out of nowhere that I blinked. What do you mean? He scrubbed a hand down his face. Ethan can't get Cassandra stabilized. The board is breathing down my neck, and Brianna keeps asking questions she knows damn well I can't answer. I stirred the pot on the stove, letting him unravel. He wasn't confiding in me. He was venting into a void he assumed was safe. The system lagged again today. Monroe keeps showing up on floors he never walks through. And Philip thinks we should move the timeline up. The timeline. There it was again, naked, unfiltered. I leaned against the counter. Is everything okay? He let out a cold laugh. Everything will be fine once we get tomorrow over with. Over with. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and checked his phone, something I hadn't done in years. Not because I respected him, but because I'd spent too long respecting myself, too little. That night I didn't hesitate. There were messages from Brianna tomorrow is going to be messy, but necessary. She won't take it well. Brace yourself. Philip says if she makes a scene, it strengthens the case. The case. So that was the real prize. Not the divorce, not even the humiliation. It was the legal positioning, the narrative, the documentation. I took screenshots, sent them to my encrypted cloud, then placed the phone exactly where I'd found it. Another complication landed the next morning, a voicemail from Veronica. Olivia, dear, I hope you're steady today. Big emotions can ruin important moments. Your behavior tonight is crucial for everyone's peace. My behavior, not Spencer's cruelty, not their manipulation, mine. Another voicemail came minutes later, Philip again. If you become overwhelmed at any point during tomorrow's event, please feel free to step outside. We'd like to avoid misunderstandings. Avoid misunderstandings translation. Don't ruin the optics. I sent both messages to Harper, who replied instantly. They were accelerating the narrative. Good. They're predictable when desperate. Predictable, yes, but still dangerous. The real pressure point came that afternoon. I was heading downstairs when I overheard Spencer on the phone in his office. His voice was lower than usual, strained. No, she won't fight it, he said. She's not like that. She's exhausted. Half of this will read like she consented. My blood went cold. He continued. Even if she tries to push back legally, we'll have documentation. I've got Grant prepping all the notes. Tomorrow will be clean. Clean. He believed he'd already won. He believed his cruelty had drained me to the point of compliance. He believed I was still the Olivia who bent instead of breaking. That was the final complication and the final confirmation I needed. Because after all the pieces they tried to move, after all the narratives they tightened around my throat, they had no idea they'd driven me into the one place they'd never survive. Clarity. When he finished the call and stepped out, I stood in the hallway and smiled at him. A soft, tired, perfectly engineered smile. He didn't notice the difference. He had no idea I was already gone. and that the next time he tried to speak over me, the world would hear me first. Lombardies on Fifth always look like money. Not new money, old polished generational money that had never worked a day in its life. Gold-rimmed sconces cast a warm glow on the private dining room, giving the illusion of intimacy, even when 40 people were packed in shoulder to shoulder. Crystal chandeliers hung low enough to reflect in the wine glasses, making everything shimmer like a performance stage. Maybe that's exactly what it was. When Spencer and I walked in, the room fell into that hush people pretend is polite, but is actually predatory. The hush of anticipation, of audience members holding their breath before the curtain rises. Every face angled toward us, hungry, curious, savoring the scent of scandal in the air. The air smelled like truffle oil and expensive tension. The first thing I noticed was Brianna. She stood beside Spencer's seat at the head of the table, wearing a white dress so sharp and minimal it could cut glass. Her blonde hair was slicked back into a ponytail, gleaming like she'd polished every strand. She didn't look at me directly. Predators rarely do. She looked at Spencer instead, as if waiting for her cue. The second thing I noticed was the place cards. Mine was not at Spencer's side, not even near the middle. It sat at the far end of the long marble table, practically exiled, next to 2 junior wives of Aegis staff women who'd smiled at me for years without ever learning a single thing about me. The third thing I noticed was Charles Monroe. He rarely attended social events, but there he was, seated, mid-table posture, straight eyes sharp, behind round silver frames. He watched the room like a man who studied earthquakes before they happened. He watched Spencer, too, and he watched me. Not with curiosity, with interest, a dangerous, calculating interest. Spencer placed a hand on the small of my back and guided me forward like I was an accessory he needed to display properly. The touch felt rehearsed, artificial, almost mocking. Smile, he murmured without looking at me. This is a celebration. Celebration. His favorite word when there was something to hide. People swarmed him instantly. Old Princeton friends clapped his shoulder. Aegis staff shook his hand. Wives complimented his cufflinks. Someone laughed too loudly, forced nervous anticipatory. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. I walked to my assigned seat at the end of the table and sat down, folding my hands neatly on the linen napkin. The junior wives beside me whispered behind their hands, eyes full of pity disguised as fascination. She looks pale. I heard they've been having problems for months. Do you think she knows what's coming? I smiled softly at my reflection in the silverware. Oh, I knew. The servers moved around us with silent precision, pouring champagne. One of them tried to fill my glass before the toast, but I covered it with my hand. I'll wait, I said. He nodded politely and stepped away. Across the room, Spencer was glowing. Absolutely glowing. He laughed too loudly. At a joke, clapped Ethan on the back, whispered something to Brianna that made her blush and lower her gaze, in that calculated, demure way women use when they're performing innocence. Then Spencer tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. Ting. The room froze. Ting. Ting. The conversations died. Ting. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. He stood at the head of the table, perfectly backlit by the chandelier, his smile smug and bright and theatrical. Everyone, he said, raising his glass, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you're all busy people, but this is special. He paused, soaking in the attention like a man bathing in praise. He glanced down the table toward me, giving me a smile that was almost sympathetic. Almost. As you know, he continued, today is Olivia's birthday. Polite applause. Tiny. Obligatory. He waited for silence again. And birthdays, he said, are a time for honesty. The word hung in the air like a blade. He lowered his glass grip, tightening around the stem. They are a time to start new chapters, to close old ones. People straightened in their chairs. Some exchanged glances. Brianna tensed slightly. Veronica dabbed the corner of her lips like she could sense violence in the air. Gregory folded his hands, leaning forward. Spencer's lips curved. So tonight, he said, voice, steady cruel, is about new beginnings. He lifted his glass again. To new beginnings. Another pause. This one deliberate, surgical, without Olivia. Gasps, whispers, a strangled laugh from one of his divorced Princeton friends, and then laughter, real brutal, echoing through the room like shattering glass. Someone muttered, Jesus, he actually did it. Someone else said, this is wild. Someone at the far end recorded with their phone angled perfectly to capture me. Brianna clapped once like a seal at a show and smiled at Spencer with sparkling triumph. Spencer's grin widened. "We're done," he said. "You'll get the papers tomorrow. Happy birthday." The gasp from my corner of the table was loud enough to echo, but I didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't blink. I simply rose from my chair, not quickly, not angrily, deliberately. A slow, quiet motion that sliced the air cleaner than any shout. The laughter faltered. A server paused mid-step. Even Spencer's smile twitched. I picked up my clutch, small black satin, and walked the length of the table. Every set of eyes followed me. Every whisper died in their throats. The floor beneath my heels didn't echo. It pulsed, like a growing heartbeat. When I reached Spencer, he smirked. "Olivia," he said softly, "don't make this messy." I smiled back. "I'm not here to make a mess." I set the black envelope on the table between us. I didn't drop it. I placed it, dead center, right on the glowing white linen, like an offering or a verdict. "Before you pop champagne," I said, voice steady enough to slice bone you should probably call home. Spencer blinked, slowly. "What?" I tilted my head slightly. "Ask your parents why the bank called, why their loan is now an emergency recall." A ripple went through the room. Gregory jerked in his seat. Veronica's hand froze midair. And I added, "Maybe call the Aegis board, see if they're still comfortable with your leadership, once they realize Cassandra Engine doesn't legally belong to you anymore." Ethan choked on his champagne. Someone near him whispered, "What the hell is she talking about?" Spencer's voice cracked. "What did you do?" I leaned in slightly close enough that he could feel the cold calm radiating off me. "What you taught me," I said. "I took advantage of your distraction." Brianna's lips parted, confusion breaking through the confidence on her face. Spencer grabbed the envelope. "Olivia?" I cut him off. 7 minutes. His eyes flicked up. "What?" "You'll understand in 7 minutes." And then before he could open it, before the room could inhale, I turned and walked away. Silence trailed behind me like a veil, but one sound cut through it. The soft, deliberate click of a phone camera shutting off as Charles Monroe lowered his hand and smiled. A real smile, a knowing smile, as if he'd just witnessed something inevitable finally happening. I reached the door, placed my hand on the brass handle, and pushed. Behind me, I heard Spencer tear open the envelope. Then the first phone buzzed. A second, a third, a cascade of alerts vibrating through the table like distant thunder. Chaos had arrived right on time. The room erupted before I took 3 full steps down the hallway. It started with one vibration, someone's phone lighting up with a sharp, unmistakable corporate alert tone. Then another. Then a flurry. Suddenly, the entire dining room sounded like a hive waking up violently. Buzz, buzz, ping, buzz, buzz, buzz. And then voices sharp, frantic, splintering through the air. "What does that mean? Emergency recall. Is this a glitch? Why did the board send a red level memo at 8 p.m. on a Saturday, Greg? Did you know about this? Check your email." Now. The catering staff froze mid-service, holding trays of creme brulee like fragile shields. I didn't look back. Not yet. That was Spencer's moment, the moment he realized the trap he'd been building wasn't for me. It was for him. I walked slowly down the hallway, heels tapping on the marble like a countdown clock. Each tap echoed the unraveling behind me. The air felt heavier, with every step charged like the seconds before lightning strikes, but I hadn't even reached the exit before I heard his voice. "Olivia." Not controlled, not smooth, not the charming, composed Spencer Caldwell that everyone worshipped. This was raw, panicked, on the verge of cracking. I turned around halfway, just enough to see him storming out of the dining room envelope, crushed in his fist, face flushed and tight. Behind him, guests spilled out like a crowd fleeing a burning theater, phones in hand, eyes wide, each wearing a different version of horror or fascination. Spencer reached me in 5 long strides. "What the hell is this?" he hissed. I lifted an eyebrow. "You opened it. You tell me." He shoved the envelope toward me, papers sticking out at angles. "Don't play games, Olivia. What did you do to Cassandra? Why is Helix Holdings on every licensing document? Why is the bank freezing my parents' accounts?" I took a slow breath, letting the scent of expensive cologne and desperation mix in the air between us. "Nothing you didn't sign." He blinked, stunned. "What, you signed every one of those authorizations yourself?" I said gently. "You were too busy texting Brianna to read the fine print." Behind him, Brianna appeared in the doorway, pale under the soft golden lights. Her mascara smudged slightly at the edges, just enough to tell me she'd started panicking before she stepped into view. She tugged her wrap around her shoulders, voice trembling. "Spence, what's going on? Don't call me that," he snapped, sharp, humiliating, more cutting than anything I could say. Her mouth fell open. Gregory pushed his way out, next face mottled red. "Spencer, the bank is requesting immediate collateral verification." "They said the refinance is now a liability event," I finished for him. Gregory swung toward me, fury twisting his features. "What did you do to my loan?" "The same thing you did to me," I said softly. "Sign something important without reading it." Veronica followed him out, clutching her clutch like she might faint. Her voice came out strangled. "Olivia, darling, we can talk about this privately. We're well past private, Veronica." Her mouth snapped shut. Charles Monroe emerged less calm, as a surgeon stepping into an operating room. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He took in the scene, hands in pockets expression, unreadable but alert, calculating. He looked straight at me, then nodded once. A subtle acknowledgement. "A signal I see you. I understand." Spencer stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his temper. "You think you can embarrass me. You think you can pull a stunt like this in front of my family. My board. You did that," I said. "All I did was give you the stage." He pointed the crushed papers at me. "You manipulated contracts. You used insider access. You sabotaged company property. This is fraud, Olivia. This is illegal." I almost laughed. "You want to talk about illegal? Should we start with you rewriting Cassandra's code, attribution to yourself, or you shifting assets into Brianna's name while still married, or the way you planned to stage a public meltdown so your lawyer could file on grounds of my instability?" A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Madison gasped. Chloe covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Spencer's face drained of color. Stop saying things like that." "Why?" I asked. "Because now you have an audience," his voice rose, cracking. "You don't know what you're talking about." But his eyes darted left, right, left, searching for an escape, a lie, a lifeline. Even Veronica saw it. Her perfectly curated mask slipped, fear-eyed as shining through. "Oh, Olivia," she stammered, "if you've misunderstood something, honey—" I said gently, "I didn't misunderstand anything. I just stopped pretending." Charles Monroe cleared his throat softly. The conversation fell silent instantly. He stepped forward until he stood beside Spencer, but addressed me. "Miss Reed," he said calmly, "as 4 minutes ago, the board initiated an emergency audit. Your documentation," he nodded to the envelope, "appears substantive." Spencer spun toward him. "Charles, wait, there's context. There's missing information. This is not—" Monroe held up a hand. "Spencer, breathe." It wasn't soothing. It was an instruction, a command. Monroe looked back at me. "You've been transparent tonight. More than your husband, it seems. If there's more we should know, now is the time." Spencer snapped. "Don't encourage her. She's lying. She's delusional." I tilted my head. "There it is," I whispered. The words fell like a guillotine. Gasps, whispers, a few knowing looks between women who'd been in my exact position once upon a time. Spencer froze, realizing too late that he'd said the one thing that confirmed every accusation I just made. He tried to backpedal. "I didn't mean she's been unstable for months." I took a single step forward, closing the distance between us. "Then why," I asked quietly, "do all of your emails contradict that?" He blinked. What emails? The crowd shifted, phones angled upward, recording. I spoke clearly, calmly, loud enough for every witness to hear. "The emails where you instruct Philip Grant to build a case against me as an irrational liability. The ones where you ask Brianna to provoke me to capture emotional volatility. The ones where you request Cassandra's attribution files be reassigned. And the one where you tell Ethan to delete the backup logs." A tremor ran through Spencer's jaw. "That's none of those aren't—" But his voice failed. His breath hitched. His eyes darted again. He was done. Brianna looked like she'd been slapped. What, she whispered. "What emails?" "Spencer, did you use me for once?" He didn't answer. For once he had no script. Monroe looked at him the way a man looks at a crumbling investment. He turned to his associate. "Pull every server log from the past 90 days. Yes, sir." "Pull Spencer's access history." "Yes, sir." "And flag Cassandra's attribution chain." Spencer jolted. Charles, you can't just sit down," Monroe said. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was final. Spencer didn't sit. His knees simply buckled, and he landed in the nearest chair like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. Brianna backed away slowly, shaking her head, mascara streaking. Veronica clung to Gregory's arm, whispering, "Do something. Do something." But Gregory looked winded, gray, beaten. I stood in the hallway watching the empire collapse, not with joy, not with vengeance, with clarity, with closure. Monroe turned to me one last time. "You said 7 minutes," he murmured. I nodded. "It's been 8. He exhaled, almost impressed. Then he walked back into the dining room, gathering board members, associates, investors. Their voices grew urgent, overlapping the sound rising into a storm. Spencer finally looked at me. Really looked. Why, he whispered, "Why would you do this?" We were done long before tonight," I said. "You just waited for an audience to make it official?" His jaw trembled. "I didn't think you'd fight back." "I know," I said. "That's why you lost." I turned, walked toward the exit. Behind me, Spencer called out, desperate, cracking open at the seams. "Olivia, don't walk away." I didn't stop, didn't look back. My hand touched the door. The metal felt cold, grounding. I glanced over my shoulder just once. Not at him, at Brianna, at Monroe, at Veronica, frozen in disbelief, at the room that had expected my humiliation but ended up witnessing his. And I said calmly, "Enjoy dessert, Spencer. It's the last sweet thing you'll ever get from me." Then I pushed the door open and left him in the wreckage he built. The hallway outside the private dining room was dimmer, quieter, like I'd stepped off stage and into the wings. The noise behind me dulled, muffled by heavy doors and thick carpet, but I could still feel it, a tremor in the walls, a pressure in the air. I didn't rush. My heels clicked slowly down the corridor past framed black and white photos of celebrity diners and long-forgotten newspaper reviews. My reflection trailed me in every bit of polished glass. Same black dress, same neat hair, same face. But inside, I was unrecognizable to myself. The hostess at the front gave me a quick, uncertain glance as I passed. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Not for them," I said. "For me, I think it might be." Her eyes widened, but I was already pushing through the glass doors and stepping out into the night. Fifth Avenue hit me like a different planet. Cold air, honking taxis, neon lights and headlights, and the distant wail of a siren somewhere downtown. People hurried past the entrance, wrapped in scarves and winter coats, oblivious to the explosion happening 40 feet above their heads. For a moment, I just stood there breathing. The sky was a dark, endless dome over the city. A breeze cut through my thin dress, raising goosebumps on my arms. I could still taste champagne on my tongue, cheap sweetness layered over years of bitterness. Across the street, my Tesla sat where I'd left it. Ordinary, patient, a small controlled thing in a world that had just gone off script. I crossed at the light, ignoring the chatter from a group of tourists nearby, and slid into the driver's seat. The car's interior lights glowed softly as the door shut, turning the chaos of Manhattan into a distant echo. Inside it was just me. Leather, silence, breath. My phone buzzed again and again in my clutch calls, text notifications, but I ignored it and opened my laptop instead. The screen lit up, pulling me out of my body and back into the architecture I'd built. The Helix dashboard loaded a grid of color-coded status tiles. Within seconds, they began to update in real time. Cassandra license status transfer complete. Aegis access revoked. Hampton's refinance acceleration triggered. Caldwell Trust cross-default active. Archive package sec mirror sent. Backup package Titan Ridge notified. Small hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. Not cruel, not unhinged. Just disbelief that, after months of planning, the dominoes were actually falling exactly, precisely, ruthlessly, the way I'd designed them to. My hands were steady on the keyboard, steadier than they'd been in years. From my parking spot, I had a clear view through Lombardi's massive floor-to-ceiling windows. The private dining room was high enough that I couldn't see faces clearly, but I could see movement. Frantic, angular, shattered. People standing, sitting, pacing, grabbing their coats, gesturing wildly with phones clamped to their ears. Staff rushed in and out, servers, managers, someone who looked like the owner. The warm, controlled lighting inside now made the chaos look theatrical, like a scene from a prestige drama. If it hadn't been my life, I might have found it beautiful. My phone lit up again, this time with a name that mattered. Harper. I slipped it out, answered, and didn't bother with hello. "You got the board ping?" I asked. "Oh, I got everything," she said. There was a smile in her voice. "They tripped every wire you laid. SEC mirrors confirmed. Titan Ridge opened your data packet. The bank acceleration went through. I'm assuming the performance went as planned." Spencer announced our divorce in front of 40 people, then called me delusional when I named his tactics. "Oh, honey," she said softly, "he handed you his throat." I leaned back against the seat, staring at the restaurant's glowing windows. "How do you feel?" she asked. It was an honest question. Not did it work, not are we safe. How do you feel? I considered it. "Light," I said finally. "And sad? And done?" She hummed. "That's about right." We went over logistics timelines, next steps, legal filings. Catherine would send formal notice to Aegis in the morning asserting my ownership of Cassandra. The SEC investigator already had the anonymous data drop. Titan Ridge's team would call me within 48 hours to formalize licensing. Every piece had a place. Every place was occupied. When we hung up, my phone still showed dozens of missed calls. Spencer, Veronica, unknown numbers that were probably board members, several from Mom, which I decided to answer. "Hey," I said quietly. "Are you safe?" were my mother's first words. "Yes." A breath of relief traveled 600 miles in a second. "Are they?" she began. "Not safe," I said. "Not like they were this morning." She was silent for a long moment. "You didn't sound happy when you said that." I'm not," I admitted. "I didn't want to destroy them, Mom. I couldn't let them keep erasing me." "You didn't destroy them," she said calmly. "You just stopped holding up the parts of their world they were standing on. If they fall, that's gravity." I closed my eyes. "When are you coming to the brownstone?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll take the early train. I want to see you where you live, not where you pretend." When the call ended, I sat still for a moment, watching my reflection in the dark glass of the restaurant windows. Inside, the chaos seemed to peak and then shift, morphing from shock into triage. People were leaving now, some storming out, others walking slowly stunned, like survivors exiting a crash site. My laptop chimed again. "New message, SEC Public Corps. Subject follow-up request." I didn't open it yet. Instead, I watched as one familiar figure stepped out onto the balcony, attached to the private dining room. The glass door slid open. Cold air swept in and ruffled tablecloths. Even from this distance, I knew that posture, that frustration. Gregory Caldwell paced back and forth on the small terrace phone, glued to his ear-free hand, but chopping the air as he shouted into the receiver. A server tried to approach with a tray. He waved him off so violently that the poor guy flinched and backed away. For the first time since I'd known him, Gregory looked small, less like a titan, more like a man who'd finally realized his bloodline wasn't bulletproof. A few seconds later, another figure appeared, Veronica, still impeccable but with hair slightly askew, and lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. She clutched her phone with both hands, staring at whatever message had just come through like it was a death notice. Behind them across the room, I saw Spencer. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't shouting. He was sitting at the table still in his suit, still under the glow of the chandelier, but his shoulders were slumped, his head bowed, his hand limp around his glass, untouched. For the first time in 8 years, he looked human. Not powerful, not invincible, not untouchable. Just a man who'd finally discovered there were consequences for building an empire on someone else's spine. I didn't smile. I didn't revel. I just watched. After a while, I put the car in drive and pulled away. The city swallowed me up quickly. Lights, movement, the rhythmic blur of traffic. I drove across the bridge, the Manhattan skyline receding behind me, headed toward Brooklyn, toward the brownstone that didn't have his name on any deed. My sanctuary. When I parked and walked up the stone steps to my front door, the street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A couple argued softly on the corner about whether to order Thai or pizza. Normal life surged on, indifferent to the financial earthquake I'd set off across the river. Inside, the brownstone smelled like coffee grounds and clean wood. My laptop bag landed on the kitchen table with a soft thump. I took off my heels and flexed my toes against the cool hardwood. The first thing I did was pull my blue ceramic mug from the cabinet. For years, that mug had been a symbol of service of early mornings spent making coffee for a man who didn't see me. Tonight, for the first time, I made coffee for myself and no one else. The sound of the machine filled the quiet kitchen. The rich smell wrapped around me, grounding, warm, familiar. I leaned on the counter phone face down beside me and let myself feel everything. The adrenaline, the fear, the grief. Because there was grief. Not for the man Spencer actually was, but for the man he'd pretended to be. The man I'd believed I'd married. The partner I'd thought I had before, power carved out whatever was left of his empathy. My laptop chimed again. New message, Titan Ridge Capital. Subject proprietary licensing discussion. Another new message, Catherine Blackwood. Subject Aegis Board, emergency session notes. And another new message, Harper and Gwyn. Subject, you did it. I didn't open them immediately. Instead, I wrapped my hands around the mug and took my first sip. The coffee was hot, a little too strong, slightly bitter. Perfect. Standing there barefoot in my own kitchen, wearing the black dress I'd chosen for myself, I realized something that made my chest ache in a new way. This peace, this quiet, this control. It tasted better than revenge. My phone buzzed one more time. No name on the screen. Just a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was before I answered. I swiped, lifted it to my ear. Silence on the other end. Then you destroyed everything. Spencer. His voice was hoarse, ragged, not the smooth, polished instrument he used in boardrooms. I leaned my hip against the counter. No, I said. You did. You could have walked away, he said. You could have taken what I offered and disappeared quietly. What you offered was nothing. It was more than you deserved, he snapped. There he was, the real man, the entitlement bleeding even as he bled. I sighed softly. You built your entire life on something you didn't create, I said. You tried to gut me out of my own work, my own company, my own story. All I did was return ownership to its rightful place. He exhaled hard. The board will turn on you, he said. They'll paint you as vindictive, dangerous. No one in this industry will trust you. I glanced at my laptop screen where Titan Ridge's email still glowed. Funny I said they already do. He was quiet. Then a softer question, one he probably hadn't meant to ask out loud. Did you ever love me? The past 8 years flashed behind my eyes, MIT lectures, late-night coding sessions, shared dreams, first holidays, the way he'd once looked at me before power became his religion. Yes, I said. I did. What changed, he whispered. You did, I answered, and then I did. We stayed in that silence for a heartbeat that felt final. Goodbye, Spencer. Olivia. I hung up, blocked the number, set the phone down. Then finally I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began answering the emails that belonged to the next chapter of my life. Not his. Mine. The revenge wasn't the chaos in that dining room. It wasn't the panic in his voice or the desperation in his calls. The real revenge was this sitting in a home he didn't know existed, drinking coffee from a mug he hadn't bought, watching my own name appear at the top of contracts, patents, and legal filings. The real revenge was peace. And I was just getting started. The morning after the birthday ambush felt like waking up in a different life, one I had stepped into, not stumbled into. The air in the brownstone was cold and clean, untouched by anyone's expectations. Light came through the windows in long stripes, hitting the hardwood floor like quiet applause. But there was no celebration in me, just clarity. My phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter when I walked in. Not frenzied like last night, but steady, controlled. The kind of buzz that meant people who once thought they owned me were realizing I wasn't theirs to manage anymore. I let it ring. Instead, I poured water into the kettle and grabbed my blue ceramic mug. The same one I'd used every morning for 8 years, but this time the ritual belonged to me. The hum of the kettle, the slow pour, the smell of dark roast blooming into the air. No measuring. No perfect temperature. No performance. Just coffee. Just mine. My laptop lit up before I even touched it. Harper had sent an email at 6:03 a.m. subject. He's spiraling. Time to move. Below it, a short message. Catherine got a call from Aegis at 5:40. Emergency board meeting. They want to clarify intellectual property ownership. They have no idea you're already 5 steps ahead. Be ready. I allowed myself a long exhale. Not relief, just acknowledgement. Every move Spencer made now would be reactive, desperate, sloppy. And in corporate warfare, panic is the deadliest weakness. Before I could type a reply, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I already knew who stood outside. Spencer. The security camera feed popped up automatically, him on my stoop, looking like a man who hadn't slept. His hair was unwashed, his tie hung loose. His coat was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. And his eyes, God, he looked like something had hollowed him out. He rang again harder. For a moment, I just stared at him through the screen. 8 years of marriage, and I had never, not once, seen him look small. I opened the door, but only a fraction. His jaw tensed. We need to talk. I don't think we do, I said. He pushed a hand through his hair. Olivia, everything is falling apart. The board froze my accounts. My parents' loan just accelerated. The trust distributions got shut down. Spencer Ward Caldwell, the man with 10 safety nets, just hit the ground. I need to understand what you did. I studied him. Not out of pity, out of curiosity. What does a man like Spencer look like, stripped of his arrogance? Apparently ordinary? You're not here to understand, I said. You're here to negotiate. I'm here because you left me with nothing. No, I said softly. I left you with exactly what you earned. He flinched. For the first time in years, I watched comprehension, not denial, cross his face. You're not going to get away with this, he whispered. I already have. His anger cracked, revealing the fear underneath. Just tell me what you want. I closed the door without answering. He shouted my name, banged on the wood with the side of his fist, but the brownstone walls, thick with age and independence, swallowed the sound. Inside my laptop pinged another email from Catherine. Subject SEC wants a full deposition. Body. They are prioritizing the Cassandra misrepresentation in your IP filings. We'll control the narrative. Narrative. A word Spencer had always used. But this time, the narrative wasn't his to shape. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the archived documents, the patents, the licensing agreements, the incriminating emails Spencer had sent to Ethan, the restructuring plans that had referred to me as redundant. Every piece was dated, watermarked, and mirrored to 3 different encrypted servers. Facts, not accusations. Evidence, not emotion. The kettle clicked softly behind me, finished boiling. The steam rose in a slow white plume, dissolving into the morning light. A second ping, another email, this one from a private address, unknown sender. No subject line, just a PDF attached. I clicked it open. A full internal audit from Spencer's department at Aegis. The header alone made my eyebrows lift. Unauthorized data use inquiry. The sender, hidden, masked behind a VPN, had included a single line of text. He's been using Cassandra to manipulate client funds. You'll want this. I didn't need to guess who sent it. Brianna. The timing was too exact, the tone too desperate, the guilt too heavy not to spill. Women like Brianna always thought they were different, special, chosen. Until the man they built their life on started digging a hole under their feet. I saved the file encrypted. It sent it to both Catherine and Harper. Almost instantly, Harper replied, "Oh, she's scared. This helps us more than it helps her. Use it." I took a sip of coffee. My hands didn't shake. The sun had fully risen now, pouring gold across the table. The laptop reflected the light, illuminating line after line of the truth I'd buried, built weaponized. Then, another buzz. This one was a text. From a number I didn't have saved. Thank you. For believing in me once. I wish things were different. CC Chloe, the youngest Caldwell, the only one who looked at me without calculation. Her message was a soft break in the tension, a reminder that even in a collapsing empire, not everyone deserved to burn. I typed back, "Be careful. The fallout isn't your fault. You get to choose a different life." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Thank you." I closed my phone, heart unexpectedly tight. The world around me was shifting fast, legal consequences, corporate drama, personal implosions, but inside something steadied, like my internal compass had realigned. I wasn't fighting anymore, I was reclaiming. And that's a very different kind of power. By noon, the SEC had formally requested a meeting. By 1, Aegis's board had sent an email demanding a discussion on ownership clarification. By 2, Catherine sent a message Helix must formally present holdings and patents. You're in control now. And, as I gathered everything files, proof the blueprint of a plan I'd built quietly, in the shadows a strange calm settled over me. Not triumph, not fury, just certainty. For the first time since Spencer promised me a life that never existed, everything I held was finally undeniably mine. The SEC offices were colder than I expected, sharp metallic air that smelled faintly of toner and disinfectant. The kind of place where truth wasn't emotional, it was documented, indexed, time-stamped. Catherine walked beside me, heels quiet on the polished floor. She didn't speak until we reached the conference room. "This won't be adversarial," she said softly. "They don't want you, they want him. Just answer what you can prove." I nodded. The glass door slid open and 3 investigators sat waiting. Not hostile, not warm. Professional. Miss Reed, the lead investigator, said, rising to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming in. We've reviewed your filings. We have questions about Cassandra engine attribution, licensing chains, and unauthorized data use initiated by Mr. Caldwell." Catherine placed a folder on the table. "This," she said, sliding it forward, is every patent filing under Olivia's maiden name, time-stamped years before Aegis existed. This is ownership. Another folder. These are the licensing agreements Spencer Caldwell signed, granting Helix Holdings the primary rights, and then the final folder. These are emails regarding planned misrepresentation, coercive tactics, and a proposed strategy to frame Miss Reed as emotionally unstable to force her out of the company. Their brows lifted, their pens stilled, the air changed. I watched them read page after page. Their silence wasn't doubt. It was confirmation. When they finally looked up, the lead investigator said, "Miss Reed, you've been wrongfully removed from your own intellectual property." No dramatics. Just fact. He continued, "We will be opening a full inquiry into Aegis Capital and Mr. Caldwell. You will be kept informed. And, for what it's worth, I'm sorry you went through this. Sorry. I didn't expect the word to land as hard as it did. Not because I needed their sympathy, but because it was the first time anyone in power acknowledged what had been stolen." When the meeting ended, Catherine and I stepped into the hallway. She exhaled long and slow. "You did good." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Is this where it finally shifts?" "No," she said. "This is where it begins." She meant it, and I felt it. We left the building. The afternoon light was slanted and cold, dragging long shadows across the sidewalk. My phone buzzed the second we stepped outside. A message from Harper. "Turn on the news. Aegis is tanking." I stopped walking. Catherine took the phone from my hand, tapped the screen, and together we watched the headline flash across a live stream window: "Aegis Capital halts all trading activity." Amid IP crisis. Below it a smaller banner. Sources allege proprietary tech misattributed for years. It hit faster than I anticipated. Reporters outside Aegis, cameras flashing. Employees pouring out of the glass building like ants from a shattered colony. Then, shockingly, footage of Spencer storming through the lobby, yelling at staff demanding access to servers that now required biometric signatures he no longer controlled. Harper's next text came almost instantly. "They're interviewing former employees." Ethan flipped. He admitted Spencer forced him to falsify attribution logs. "This is a collapse." I stared at the screen, not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady, grounded. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. Another buzz. A voicemail from Veronica. Her voice cracked brittle as porcelain hitting tile. "Olivia, darling, please call me back. The trust accounts are frozen. The Hamptons loan is being called in full. The board won't talk to Gregory. I please. For the girl's sake. Please." I deleted the message. Before she ever cared about my sake, she cared only about her image. Now she cared because her image was collapsing. Then another message appeared. This time text. From Chloe. "Mom's losing it. I'm sorry she keeps calling you. I know we don't deserve anything. I just wanted to say thank you for not letting them erase you." I typed back, "None of this is your fault. You get to choose who you become." 3 dots, then nothing. But it felt final, in the right way. As Catherine and I walked toward the brownstone, a figure stepped out from a parked town car. Charles Monroe. Not frantic, not desperate, deliberate. He approached with calm precision. "Miss Reed," he said, giving a small nod. A word Catherine tensed, but I lifted a hand to signal it was fine. Monroe's gaze was sharp, calculating, but not predatory. "Aegis is in freefall," he said matter-of-factly. "The board will fracture. They'll need someone to stabilize operations, someone who understands what Cassandra actually is." I said nothing. "You could do it," he continued, "if you wanted to." A gust of cold wind pushed between us, carrying the distant city noise horn's sirens' chatter, the world moving on ready to reshape itself. But I wasn't tempted. "I'm not going back into a building that erased me," I said calmly. Monroe studied my face. "Then build something better," he said. "And when you're ready for investors, call me." He handed me his card. White, minimal, weighty. Then he stepped into his car and was gone. Catherine let out a low whistle. That's a door people spend their whole careers trying to open. I slipped the card into my coat pocket. "I don't want Aegis's door," I said. "I want mine." We walked the last block to the brownstone. The sun was setting, turning the windows gold. A long shadow of the building stretched across the sidewalk, solid, unshakable. Inside, the quiet wrapped around me again. Not empty, just peaceful. The blue mug sat in the sink, a symbol of every morning I'd lived for someone else. I washed it slowly, drying it with a towel, letting my mind settle with the motion. Catherine texted one final update SEC filing received. You're now officially recognized as the original and sole architect of Cassandra. Well done. Well done. Not the applause of a crowd, not the gasps of a ruined empire, just recognition. Simple, pure, undeniable. I set the mug on the counter. For the first time in years, I felt my story snap back into my hands like a taut string released. Not revenge, restoration, and tomorrow I would decide what to build next. 6 months after the night Spencer called me a failure, the skyline outside my brownstone looked different. Maybe it was just the evening haze warming the edges of the buildings, or maybe it was me finally seeing the city without feeling trapped inside it. Either way, everything felt steady. The kind of steady I didn't know I was allowed to ask for. I stood on my balcony, one hand wrapped around the railing, the other around my blue mug. The mug didn't shake anymore. My hands didn't shake anymore. Even the air felt lighter, like the weight I'd carried for years had finally loosened its grip. Behind me, my mother's voice floated through the open door. Liv, honey, do you want tea or coffee tonight? Coffee, I called back, smiling. I'm celebrating. She laughed softly, warm, gentle, the kind of sound I didn't realize I'd missed until it came back into my life. Celebrating what? Breathing. Her footsteps padded lightly across the wooden floor, and she stepped out beside me. She wore her soft, gray cardigan, the one with the slightly frayed sleeve she refused to throw away. I tried to buy her newer ones. She kept choosing this one. It's a good thing to celebrate, she said, leaning on the railing next to me. We stood there in silence. Not the suffocating silence of my marriage. Not the brittle, weaponized silence Spencer used when he wanted me to shrink. This one felt full, alive, peaceful. My mother looked out at the city eyes reflecting the gold of the setting sun. You did it, Liv. Did what you saved yourself. Most people never manage that. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth of it sat softly between us like a warm blanket. Inside my laptop chimed with new emails, clients' partnerships, interview requests. Ostraquan had exploded into the financial world faster than I expected. Investors who once ignored me now waited weeks just to speak with someone on my team. But the numbers weren't what made me proud. It was the people. Dr. Serena Patel, whose predictive volatility model had been dismissed by her previous firm as too theoretical, now led one of our core divisions. Naomi Brooks, who'd been told she was not assertive enough for leadership, now managed our largest portfolio team, and her returns outpaced entire hedge funds. Jenna Alvarez, brilliant but overlooked coder, now built systems without anyone stealing her name. Every day I walked into Astra, I saw them working confident, unafraid, fully themselves. I saw what I never got to be inside Aegis, free. Their laughter echoed across the office. Their debates filled the conference rooms with fire and brilliance. Their victories lit the floor with an energy I couldn't have imagined 6 months ago. We were building something different, not perfect, but real. My mother nudged me gently. What's that smile for? I didn't realize I was smiling. Just thinking, I said. About the team, about Astra. It suits you, she said softly. This life, this version of you. The version of me who no longer flinched when a car pulled into the driveway. The version who no longer measured self-worth by someone else's approval. The version who didn't apologize every time she took up space. The version who fought back and then built a life where she never had to fight for basic respect again. My mom rested her head lightly against my shoulder. You know, she said, voice quiet, your Aunt Marie keeps bragging at book club that her niece is some kind of a Wall Street superhero. I snorted. Oh God, I'm serious. My mother laughed. She says my niece toppled a whole institution with a laptop and a cup of coffee. She's making it sound cooler than it was. My mom raised an eyebrow. Is she? I paused. Okay, maybe it was a little cool. Inside the kitchen, the timer dinged. Mom stepped back toward the door. Tea's ready. Come in when you want. I nodded, letting her go inside as I stayed on the balcony a moment longer. The wind shifted slightly, tugging at my hair. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing jazz through an open window. The notes floated upward, soft and warm, mixing with the quiet hum of the city, settling into night. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a trap or a battlefield. It felt like an open door, a new chapter, my own book. And the best part, I wasn't writing it alone. I was writing it surrounded by brilliant women who understood what it meant to be underestimated and what it meant to rise anyway. A notification lit up my phone. A message from Harper. You ready for tomorrow? Titan Ridge wants to sign the 5-year license. Huge win. I typed back ready. And I was. Ready for the deal. Ready for the next chapter. Ready for a life that wasn't defined by survival. I lifted the blue mug, taking one last sip as the sun dipped below the buildings, leaving streaks of pink and orange in its wake. This was peace. This was the ending Spencer never saw coming, and the beginning I finally deserved. The conference room at Titan Ridge was nothing like Aegis. No marble floors, no eco-polished glass, no board members who treated silence like superiority. Just a wide window over the Hudson soft chairs and a long wooden table that looked like it belonged in a writer's loft. Serena, Naomi, and Jenna sat with me, my team, my people. Across from us, the Titan Ridge partners reviewed the final pages of the Cassandra Engine License Agreement. Their lead partner, a quiet, thoughtful woman named Nicole Hahn, looked up at me with a small smile. You built something extraordinary, she said. We're honored to work with you. The words hit harder than I expected, not because I needed validation, but because it came without conditions, without condescension, without a footnote about who deserved the credit, just truth. Nicole slid the pen across the table. Whenever you're ready, Olivia. My hand didn't shake as I signed. When the last page was done, Titan Ridge sealed it with a firm handshake. Serena leaned subtly toward me, whispering, You did it. But it didn't feel like did it. It felt like started it. After the meeting, we walked out into the crisp early evening. The city buzzed around us, streets, alive headlights, blinking people pushing past one another in that chaotic rhythm that somehow made sense only here. Jenna stretched her arms overhead. Drinks on me. We're celebrating. I don't care if it's Tuesday. Naomi grinned. Agreed. I want tequila. For the love of God, Serena muttered, no tequila. I have to be in the office at 8. Exactly, Naomi said. We'll be done by midnight. They bickered all the way down the street, their laughter echoing behind me. I watched them for a moment, their energy, their joy, their freedom. A year ago, I couldn't imagine being surrounded by laughter that wasn't pretending. I told them I'd meet them later, and they peeled off into the subway entrance, still arguing about tequila and responsible decision-making. I kept walking. The city smelled like roasted nuts, wet pavement, and a little smoke from a vendor's grill. A bus hissed to a stop beside me. A couple argued lightly about directions. A dog barked at a pigeon. Life. Not dramatic, not sharp, just life. When I reached the brownstone, the hallway light glowed warm. Mom's shoes were by the door. A new plant she'd insisted on buying sat in the corner. The place looked lived in finally. She poked her head out from the kitchen. You're home early. How'd the meeting go? I held up the signed contract folder. We got it. Her face lit up. Not pride for the win, pride for the healing. She crossed the room and hugged me, arms warm, grounding. I wish your father could see you, she whispered. I swallowed. I know. He'd say what I'm saying now. Keep going. Don't shrink. Don't make yourself small for anyone. I won't. She squeezed once more. Tea's on the stove. I'll leave you be. I walked to the balcony again, contract still in my hand. The skyline was darker now, lights flickering on one by one like distant fireflies. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until I saw the preview. Settlement proposal from Caldwell Legal. Of course. I opened it. A PDF. Cold clinical. Offering a payout far lower than what he owed. Framed as a peace offering to avoid further distress on both sides. Attached at the bottom an unsigned letter from Spencer. Handwritten. I hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was sloppy. Shaky. Olivia, I don't know how to fix any of this. I don't know how to go back to who we were. I don't know how to be the person you think I should have been. All I know is I'm sorry. S. I read it twice. Not because it mattered. It didn't change anything. But because apologies from people like Spencer were rare, not because they didn't feel guilt, but because their guilt never outweighed their pride. I forwarded the entire email to Catherine with a one-line reply, decline. Her response came within minutes. Already did. I set the phone down and stepped outside again. The night air carried the faint sound of a saxophone from a musician on the corner. Under it, the low hum of cars, the occasional laughter, a shout from someone leaving a bar. The kind of sounds I once listened to, through glass always on the wrong side of freedom. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the cold. If you had told me a year ago that I'd lose a marriage, a home, a company, and then rebuild something better from the foundation of my own pain, I wouldn't have believed you. But pain isn't an ending. not when you refuse to let it define you. Sometimes it's a beginning disguised as a collapse. I lifted my mug, the old blue one chipped on the bottom, and whispered the words that had been sitting in my chest for months. They tried to write me out of my own story. I didn't just take my name back. I built a new book. Below me, a cab honked, and someone shouted for another round of drinks. Life kept moving, and so did I. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever had your work stolen, your voice dismissed, or your worth question hit like right now, tell me in the comments who shocked you the most in this story, Spencer, Veronica, or Brianna. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe because Olivia's story isn't over. Aegis is collapsing, but the Caldwell family hasn't hit bottom yet. And trust me, the next chapter is even darker.